Every fall, birders eagerly await the Winter Finch Forecast. The forecast attempts to predict the movements of nomadic winter finches, which may migrate based on the status of cone and berry crops in northern forests. If there are not ample resources, finch species may move south or to other areas. The report used to be compiled by Ron Pittaway, but has been passed down to Tyler Hoar, who creates it based on his own research and input from those in the Finch Research Network, as well as numerous volunteers and other experts. Today we're joined by Tyler and Matt Young, also from the Finch Research Network, to hear about the outlook for the 2022 and 2023 winter finches, as well as a few species of eruptive passerines.
Hey everybody, Derek and Ryan here from Badgerland Birding. We're joined by Matt Young and Tyler Hoar from the Winter Finch Forecast crew. Excited to hear about the forecast this year. You guys ready to give us some good news, give us some bad news? What's going on?
Well, I think most people will have a good news. Some people out west may have bad news. It just depends where they're sitting. But I think from basically the Dakotas, Manitoba eastward, I think you're going to enjoy this.
Okay.
That's great. I'm excited on the edge of my seat here.
So you guys might actually have 3 years in a row here of pretty decent finch years. So
that's good news. Where should we start? What's the species that you think is going to have the biggest movement this winter?
Oh, now this is on the hot seat. Southward, I'll say redpolls.
Okay.
The cone crop reporters across North America generally have saying it's in the Western Boreal, it's average, and in the Eastern Boreal, it's poor. I drove about 3,000 miles over 5 days in Northern Ontario and Northwestern Quebec and that, and I found the birch crop to be absolutely terrible. And the alder crop is probably average, which will grab some redpolls, but I think the redpolls are going to come.
Okay, so obviously you can't have necessarily an exact 100% prediction, but compared to last year's movement for redpolls, similar or less?
Depends where you were in North America last year.
these two are in the Western Great Lakes, which was the epicenter.
Yeah, we got hit hard in a good way.
Yeah, so I think you guys will have a fairly good flight. I think more of the Eastern Great Lakes and Pennsylvania, New England, all that, I think they will have a much stronger flight. It all depends because the big cone crop and food source starts up in northwestern Ontario and runs all the way to Alaska and then down the Rocky Mountains. So it all depends when the birds come from the north, where they hit Lake Superior. Do they hit Lake Superior around Thunder Bay and then go west around the lake into Wisconsin, or are they going to go to the east and go into Michigan and southern Ontario?
Well, that's very exciting because I know a lot of people really enjoyed the redpolls last year and it became a big thing. And it was cool that everywhere we went, for sure, you would just hear them flying around or see them in the conifers or the birches and stuff. How's it looking for crossbills this year?
The red crossbills are where they are right now in the east. Are basically the eastern birds are basically sitting where they're going to probably be all winter and where they've been for most of the year in what white pines there are scattered across the Great Lakes that actually have cones, and in the red spruce crop in the East Coast. But there may, late breaking news, there may be a big effect on the maritime provinces red spruce crop because the hurricane just went through there.
Oh yeah.
The largest hurricane hit Canada basically just went through there in the last few hours. So that's going to probably do some serious damage to the cone crop.
Yeah, I mean, it could blow out the seed.
Yeah,
for sure.
Trees are being knocked over and that, so
and that
could have a good effect on the coastal ones.
That would drive them into the U.S. then?
Driving more towards Maine and area and New Brunswick area and Massachusetts didn't get directly hit. It's more in Nova Scotia, Newfoundland. That area took a big hit. And
so it kind of hit just north of where they've been stacking up all summer. I mean, they've been basically stacking up along the coast. Then there's, as Tyler said, there's an inland. Well, Massachusetts seems to have a white pine crop that's really good, kind of sticks out above everybody else. So the reds have basically packed in all along the coastal areas, and then also in Massachusetts. There's a few in the Adirondacks, few in the Algonquin area, few in the Western Great Lakes.
Yeah, North Shore, Lake Huron, South Shore, Lake Superior. There's, when I drive into that area, it's quite interesting the way you have to survey a big area, because I turn around and I look at 100 white pines, and they're just bending over with a huge crop. Then I look behind me, and I'm looking at hundreds of white pines with not a single cone. And it was like that all along the Superior Huron area, right along the edges of the lakes there.
Interesting.
Like
And-
there's cones on the south side of Lake Superior, but there's very little white pine cones on the north side of Lake Superior.
So will that be similar for white-winged crossbills then?
They are gone west.
Oh,
There is a huge masting event, a bumper crop of white spruce that starts up in the northwestern British Columbia, goes to the Northwest Territories, comes across all the prairie provinces of Canada, and comes into northwestern Ontario. We don't know how far it goes in northwestern Ontario because there's no roads up there and very spotty knowledge what's up there. But in Manitoba, from basically the tree line of the grasslands to the north side of the tree line up in the Arctic, it is this heavy white spruce crop right now. And then you have the Engelmans and white spruce and other spruce having a good crop going all the way down into the north side of the Grand Canyon, at least. So
yeah, there's white wings that nested in, or at least appears to have nested in Arizona. So it's kind of
white wing
interesting.
crossbills are in the east. There is a poor crop, terrible crop of tamarack, a poor crop of spruce, and there's a better crop in northern Wisconsin, in Zaxton Bog area. So the ones that remain in the east, they'll probably look at last year's cone crop, trying to find some seeds on the trees, and I expect there'll be some movement. Again, how they hit Lake Superior is going to be the question.
I mean, there's a few in the red spruce coastal areas where the reds are, but the reds seem to, if you give the two of them an option, everybody will eat white spruce, but white wings really target white spruce, where the reds can kind of deal with the red spruce a bit better than white spruce. But white wings like red spruce as well, and that's where there's a few of them. If you look in eBird maps, there's a few along the coast and a few inland, and probably the red spruce crop that's decent, but the white spruce doesn't seem like it's doing much of anything.
Gotcha. How are we looking for pine grosbeak and evening grosbeak?
Oh, the big charismatic ones. Well, again, where this big white spruce crop is a good berry crop from up in International Falls, Fort Francis area, northwestern Ontario, Minnesota, outwards to the west coast is a pretty good berry crop. East of there, it ranges from below average to absolutely terrible. So I'm expecting pine grosbeaks from basically Lake Superior eastward to move south, and expect, again, how they get into northern Wisconsin, Minnesota, depends which way they come down to Lake Superior. But I'm expecting them to move. And if you guys don't have a good mountain ash crop, they're going to probably even push a little further south, trying to find. I expect them in towns looking for food sources this winter.
Okay.
Evening grosbeaks, they're already starting to move out of Quebec. Spruce budworm outbreaks a few weeks ago. I've had 3 in my yard here in Oshawa and near Toronto in the last 10 days. They're in eastern Pennsylvania, small numbers of them, of the first big push, but the really big push comes in late October. When I was going through the boreal forest in Ontario and Quebec, I was finding them to be town birds. Usually when I find them to be town birds in late summer, it means they're usually going to move because they don't have much food in the forest. Yeah, some little towns I did go into, and they were like the most common thing, more common than starlings.
oh, well, I hope that that's the case this year for most of
That's the dream, more common than starlings.
Yeah, actually, some of the best little towns I went to were right on the north shore of Lake Superior, an hour and a half east of Thunder Bay. So they are roaming around. And then the ones that would probably affect northwestern Wisconsin and west of Superior more is there's a jack pine outbreak, a budworm outbreak in northwestern Ontario, and they will target that. So expecting those guys to drift south too. But I don't know what northern Wisconsin is for ash, but southern Ontario and Quebec, northern New York State, New England, there's a pretty good ash crop this year. And grosbeaks will target those ash trees for those seeds pretty heavily. So if you can find a good tree somewhere in the upper Midwest that's full of ash seeds, that's not destroyed by the emerald ash borer yet, I'd keep a close eye on it.
And then how about pine siskin and purple finch?
Purple finches, they're coming south.
Okay.
They're coming south. They'll hit the ash crop too, but they've been moving for a little while. They will come south. I
Yeah,
don't
they
expect
probably
many in the Boreal or many in Canada this winter. I think they're gonna, a lot of them are gonna be moving south, and maybe even push further south.
they probably will push the furthest south than any of the finches probably in the
Okay.
state.
I remember
I
a
would
couple
say,
of years ago we had some in Louisiana, so we'll see.
There
I
is
wouldn't-
potential.
wouldn't shock me that they make a pretty good push into the south. So we'll see. I mean, the two biggest wild cards for me, and Tyler and I have talked about this, is how much will the white ash drive the dynamics in the Northeast for evening grosbeak, pine grosbeak, and purple finch? And then how much will the masting spruce crop across the Western Boreal hold up siskins, white wings, possibly even redpolls a little bit? And will that crop get depleted at a point where maybe some of the Western red coal types break loose and come east? I mean, it's a huge crop, so it might very well hold a lot of things in place. I mean, I think that's what you think, Tyler, right?
It's a massive crop. When you have a crop from tree line to tree line going across the Boreal, it's a big crop. We're talking tens of millions of trees.
Oh, that area is probably insane. If anyone wants to go bird that area, I'm sure there'll be a lot of action there at one time.
Yeah, a lot of times when you go to the Boreal forest in the winter, when you don't have a cone crop, it is as quiet as can be. You whisper and someone hears you 300 feet away. But when there's actually seed there, you'll hear the rattling of the crossbills just as they're flying back and forth or just happily buried in a tree, tearing the cones apart. The siskins in the east, the ones that have not swung to the west to join this big food source, they will utilize spruce butterworm larvae longer than the other two birds, finches, because they're small beaks. They can get in there and get the newly hatched ones in the egg cases there in late fall or late summer, early fall. So there's still lots of them are still sitting up there. But there's a secondary food source which we didn't have in 2020 when we had the huge flight. Is eastern white cedar has a pretty good crop in the Boreal forest this year. It's about the only thing that really has a crop in the eastern Boreal, but it's not a major tree of the Boreal forest. Some places you have to drive for an hour to find one. Other places you're tripping over them, but there is a good crop there, and the siskins will probably utilize it, the ones that stay up there. But big disclaimer for all these guys right now is whatever food remains there for the winter is all dependent on what the thrushes have done, what the robins are currently and cedar waxwings are currently doing, and what the red squirrels and black bears are doing too. Because when red squirrels don't have a good food source, they just go clear cut anything they can find.
That sounds about right.
So yeah, there should be siskins in the east, and should be some siskins moving to the upper Midwest.
And I know you guys normally cover the blue jays, red-breasted nuthatch, and the Bohemians. Do you guys have any thoughts on those guys this year?
The blue jays are leaving southern Canada and the east in big numbers right now. You can sit out there near the lake shore and count them by the thousands per hour leaving.
Wow.
Hawk Watch down near Detroit, I think they had 33,000 come by in one day.
Jeez. Wow.
Yeah, they're moving out of the area. The northeast states in the U.S. apparently the oak crop is poor. Some pockets are pretty good, but generally it's a poor crop. So I'm expecting the blue jays there to come even further. The ones out west in the prairie provinces where there are no crop, I've heard it's average. So I don't know how many are pushing out of that way. Red-breasted nuthatchers, they've been moving for a while. They knew the crop was poor, and they've been moving for quite some time. And the Bohemians, I think this is going to be a movement of Bohemians in the east this year. Because as with the pine grosbeaks, where they're eating the same food source, there's not a lot there for them. So I think they're going to be on the move. Cleaning up what they can find.
West then, or do they just go south?
Pardon?
Do they from the east go west then, or do they just go south?
They'll swing west looking for stuff, but a lot of times they'll just drift down towards the southeast. But right now, yeah, the crop, even in where the big spruce crop is, it's not heavy enough that I think it will hold the ones that will draw birds into it. So I think the ones in Ontario and Quebec and that will start moving southward. Yeah, I'll be looking at ornamental crab apples in towns quite closely this fall to figure out where those two fruit lovers are going to come and hit.
Yeah, my experience with Bohemian is, they hit the Great Lakes states and they work westward, and we don't. So I'm right on like central New York is right on the edge of like where you get them in the big eruption years. And so what I've found, it's interesting. It's an interesting bird. It's been slowly moving westward or eastward a little bit when where it's where it breeds. Um, but it kind of hits the coast, kind of exhausts food going west to east, hits the coast and then it starts to come back west in the like late winter, and we don't get them here usually like in numbers in the Champlain Valley and of Vermont, New York, and even like central New York. As far south as even Ithaca. It doesn't usually take place until March, April.
See, we usually get them on good flight years. They come into us earlier.
Yeah,
it's usually January. If they're coming on flight year, they're here in January, and they'll move around. And you can go to one. There's a good flock there in one area. You go there right away because good chance they're not going to be there in 2 days because they're just going to strip everything they find. They're like locusts. They'll just come by, strip every berry they have in one area, and they don't come back to that area again all winter. Like one day we had Christmas bird count, I think 3 years ago now, had over 1,000 Bohemian waxwings in one flock. And they were just stripping all the buckthorn. 2 days later, there were none around. They just stripped everything they could find and they were gone.
Yeah, we were in Maine tagging grosbeaks beginning of April, and there were big flocks, few hundreds in northern Maine and Caribou. And when we were up there, they were like a week before they were up there. And then when we were up there, we never actually ended up laying our eyes like on a nice sitting still Bohemian. We did see 3 flocks moving west, just darting westward during that time period. But other than that, they basically weren't in town, even though the week before people were seeing flocks of several hundreds in town.
Wow.
The invasive European buckthorn, I don't know if you have it up there in northern Wisconsin. It is a huge food source for robins and Bohemians. They love it, and they'll strip it out really quickly when they find it. Red cedar is another one. Down here in Southern Ontario, we get overwintering yellow rump warblers. If it's a good red cedar berry crop, it can be minus 20 Celsius, and there's a yellow rump warbler happy as can be because it has berries. When I see that, I'm enjoying it. But then I see the flocks of Bohemians start marching towards where the red cedars are. I feel sorry for those warblers because they're going to lose their food source in a matter of days.
Totally. Yeah.
How about the red-breasted nuthatches?
I don't expect many in the woods in eastern Canada this winter. They're going to be down. I think there's one in Ebert all the way down in Louisiana already now.
Yeah.
They're gonna find feeders. I have them as resident breeders in my neighborhood, and my residents don't like the new interlopers that have shown up at the feeder now. So we're getting some interesting territorial fights between the locals and these new visitors.
Yeah, they started moving in July. A lot of times people don't realize late June, early July, they actually start moving.
Okay.
Yeah, they're one of the earliest moving eruptive species, aren't they?
Totally. They're pretty much the earliest.
Yeah, that's interesting. I definitely have heard around here already people are saying, oh, we saw a nuthatch the other day, which we don't usually see yet. So it does seem like that is accurate, that they are starting to show up in places pretty far south already.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is that in the west, there's good cone crops, so probably not a ton is going to come down. In the east, they're going to get a decent amount of stuff coming down, but the hurricane might affect that too. And then in the Midwest, could be good for redpolls and purple finches especially, but it also depends on how they hit the Great Lakes.
The east is going to, the coastal area, if that crop in the Canadian provinces got hit really badly, it won't hold as many finches as we thought it would be. But the Maine and New England coastal areas seem to be okay. But then there's that big gap where there's going to be a lot of finches moving through because there's not a lot of food until you start getting up the gray zone around Lake Superior, where it's getting the crops of the west start getting a little better. But I think the upper Midwest, you're still going to have a flight coming in, and it won't be as strong as east of Lake Superior, but I think you'll still have a half decent winter finch winter this year. But yeah, the Rocky Mountain states, they're going to have finches, but they're all going to be out in the woods having a great time with all the seeds.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing out there is that, these states might get in on some higher numbers of white wings more than they usually have, like what they already have pretty much.
Interesting.
And you never know. I mean, I don't know if type 1 evenings are moving out west or not. They might be. We won't know for another month or two here. I know Tom Hahn was in Jackson Hole, and had big numbers of evening grosbeaks there just a week ago. So we'll see. But we're, the forecast is mostly, geared towards the, Great Lakes kind of eastward. But we got a little bit of information in there this time on the west, with that spruce crop that just extends down the mountains, as Tyler said.
Well, cool. We appreciate the inside information.
Is there something else too that kind of erupts in the west? I thought there was one species to kind of watch for out there sometimes. I don't remember what it was.
Cassin's finch is probably the one that's not covered, that, it's just strictly western, and it seems to shift its range a bit from kind of northwest to southeast kind of thing. So yeah, it's hard to say what they'll do. Maybe in the future, as we keep improving this thing and expanding it a little bit. But
we had a few more people from Western North America in this year, and people making the comments in the eruption cone crop Facebook group there, allowed to solve some of the questions I had going on. Well, I think this year is a year where you should buy your seed early.
Okay, that's good to know.
The birds are going to come, and it all depends. For you guys in Wisconsin, it all depends how they want to hit Lake Superior. Will they swing around coming into the Michigan UP, or were they going to swing through Duluth and come around?
I hope they swing through Duluth and come around. Some good finch eruption this year.
So, Matt, pretty cool shirt you got there. If people want a Finch shirt, where can they get one of those?
They can get it right on the Finch Research Network website in the shop. And we'll also have some Road to Recovery evening grosbeak shirts too that we're putting up.
Okay, awesome.
There's a working group around grosbeaks that are, because of the whole 90% decline in the last 50 years. So that's an international group that we're working with, that we're kind of heading it up with David Yenny in Western Pennsylvania Conservancy and Powder Mill. It's kind of a collaborative. So
cool.
We're also working on kind of a, again, just to put these little plugs in there, there's an INAT project that we're kind of starting to beta test a little bit for people to put in food assessments.
Oh, okay.
To become part of become part of the Finch forecast that can help Tyler. Just, as far as increasing the amount of people putting in reports.
Yeah. The more information we can get, even if we have multiple people from the same area, it's even better. Yeah. So it allows the picture a lot. But like, I did my long drive this year, even longer than usual, because there were gaps in the reporters. I wanted to go fill in those gaps and try to see what I could see. So I looked at probably, 200,000 trees. Actually looked at them.
That's putting in for sure.
Yeah, and I remember last year you guys had so much traffic to the site that it crashed the day the forecast came out. Are we fortified? Are we ready to go this year?
Man, well, we hope so. We switched it from a shared server to a secure server, so hopefully it'll manage it. And the gentleman that Ken McEnany kind of does some of the back end stuff for the website. He reached out to the company, and we'll just to see if they can handle the volume. So we'll see. I fingers crossed. You never know sometimes with these things. Even Audubon has their crashes of websites and stuff like that every once in a while. Even the best of the best or the biggest organizations out there. So hopefully we'll be all right. But we'll see.
Gotcha.
I don't want to over promise and then have it crash. So last year was not only, it was kind of an unusual circumstance in many ways, because the website crashed and then the whole internet went down in Louisiana when we were supposed to do this interview last year.
Yeah, we were dealing with our own hurricane fallout then, so
yeah,
wouldn't wish that on anybody.
If there's a spot in the United States, a region that's going to be extremely happy with how the birds show up, so like that are probably going to come to feeders more, probably going to have a really good showing, what region would that be?
Oh, I'm gonna let you go guess that one.
Well, I mean, I would probably guess
Matt's
the Northeast
backyard.
this year. I would actually guess the Northeast this year, but I don't know. What do you think, Tyler?
I'm thinking Northeast to Michigan.
Okay.
Yeah.
So those people knew New England and Northeast area, and then the Eastern Great Lakes are going to have a fun year for winter finches.
I would watch Whitefish Point counts, and I would watch the Hawk Mountain count Duluth to see which way the ones are coming out of Northern Ontario are coming around. So I've been in north of Sault Ste. Marie on the Lake Superior shore, and seen huge movements of redpolls going along the shoreline, just hugging it, heading straight south towards Michigan.
All right. I think that's all the questions I have. Did you guys have anything that you wanted to add?
Don't think so. Other than it's always a pleasure to talk to you guys. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah,
for
you
sure.
guys as well. Thanks so much for giving us the rundown. We're excited to see what we get this year.
Yeah, everyone watching, Badgerland birding shirts on our website, Finch Research shirts on the Fern website. Go get some merch while it's hot, and enjoy your winter with the winter finches.